Hitting revenue targets is hard and requires constant hustle. Last quarter's success is already forgotten. Learn the mindset and tactics of today's most successful revenue producers in B2B marketing and sales. We call this the revenue hustle. I'm your host, Tom Hessen, navigating you on this journey. Today's show is sponsored by 9 Lenses, an interactive assessment platform that enables you to add instant value to your buyers and allows your sales team to tailor business conversations focused on the pain points each and every time. Check them out at 9lenses.com. Hi, this is Tom Hessen, your host of the Revenue Hustle podcast, and today's guest is Steve Frost. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I am so happy to be here, Tom. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited about our conversation. Steve is the VP of and Managing Director of Revenue Research and Advisory at TSIA. He's got a really long history and background in sales. Steve, why don't you give us a full intro as to what you're doing?
Well, yeah, sure. I'll give you kind of what I have done, what we're doing now. I guess I'll start with the later. So TSIA actually stands for the Technology and Services Industry Association. And we're one of the more influential companies that you probably haven't ever heard of. We are a for-profit research organization dedicated to the tech industry. And our job is to help our member companies, which are hundreds of member companies, every big name you think of, all the way down to small names you probably don't think of, come to us for advice on how to optimize and grow their service and as a service business. So we got our start, almost 20 years ago, really focusing on the services side of technology. So if you wanted to know what your first call resolution rate should be for software calls in Western Europe, like we had that data. Or if you wanted to know what your utilization rate should be for your professional services in North America, we had that data. And so what happened with that is the whole industry moved from being powered by a traditional transactional sell the license, build, sell, ship with maintenance and support to where everything was subscription and technology as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. Well, when all of these things became as a service, we knew how to make money in services. And that was something we've been studying for 15 years. And all of a sudden, the market just kind of shifts our way. So a lot of what we help companies with on our member companies on the revenue side is, what are the best practices? What do you need to do to move the needle on selling as a service offers? And in some cases, there are companies that have really been selling hardware or traditional on-prem software, and they need to move to the cloud. Some of them are companies that have been born in the cloud, but they've got to figure out how to mature their business model, because you can't just, keep pouring money into that same startup mode. Eventually, you got to mature, and they need to kind of understand what those best practices are. So that's TSIA. We really try to operate on a framework of data, not opinion, not something we make up. So we do benchmark studies with hundreds of these companies, and we get under really strict NDA, and so they contribute their data to the community, and we process and figure out how to manage it and what to do with it. And I guess the last big thing about TSIA is that we really, our data is managed around the idea of outcomes. This is not tech research. There's no, there's nothing magic about a quadrant. All right. We don't do tech research. There's no pay for play. We're here to say, this is what good looks like. This is what you need to do to move the needle. And this is the fastest way to get there. And we're not going to come in and do a big consulting contract. We don't do the fishing, but we're going to teach you how to fish, and we're going to teach you how to do it the right way. So that's TSIA. I love it. I'm a nerd, Tom. I've been geeking out on best practices my whole career, which started in like 1998, selling browsers for Netscape. Do you remember that? You remember Netscape, Tom?
Yep, that was the first browser I ever used in college. So yes.
Yeah, me too. And that, by the way, that's you talk about learning how to sell. When you got to try to convince enterprise companies that they should spend $50 a head on software that they already have bundled on their computer, because Microsoft argued that Internet Explorer was part of the operating system, right?
Sure. Yeah, right.
That
That was
the
something.
thing is, like, we didn't even know how hard it was. It's like, oh, we're just doing it, and like I think about it now, like, oh my God, like, how did we even do that? But I've done just about everything you can do to make money for a technology company. I've run sales, I run inside sales. I've been, done strategic partnerships, and a lot of what we do, at least from a revenue side. I know you've got your rules of revenue, and a lot of it comes down. I spent almost 8 years early on at Google. And I was one of their very first strategic partnership biz dev people. My job was to do, kind of our first wave of partnerships with internet service providers. So the Comcasts of the world, and back when there was such a thing, Earthlinks and Cox Cables and AT&Ts and Verizons. I had a deal stolen from me one time on the tarmac of the airport in Morristown, New Jersey, by Steve Ballmer himself. So I feel that that's a little bit of a badge of honor. But what I learned at Google that's really shaped a lot of our thinking at TSIA around this is that selling is not evil, and asking people for money in order to help them solve a problem is a very helpful thing to do. Early on at Google, we realized that if someone was in their search bar, remember when we had a search bar, right? You actually go to google.com and search. All right. If someone's searching for a dozen roses, all right, we can show them, results that show you how to plant roses or things like that. But most of the time, they're doing that because they want to buy roses. Right. And selling them ads for those roses is actually more helpful to them than if we were to just provide them information. And so as long as it's done in the right context, selling isn't evil. Most salespeople I know are the most helpful and most people-centric, customer-centric people out there. And so I think sometimes we do get a little bit of a bad rap in this idea that selling is selfish, or selling is not in the customer's best interest.
Right.
So,
right.
But it's shaped a lot of our thinking on how we go to market at TSIA and how we help our member companies. So hopefully that gives you some background, probably more than you wanted, Tom, but it was worth.
No, I mean, I think it speaks to your diverse background and why you're such a good fit with TSIA. And, I've certainly learned more and more about the organization, and now I see you guys popping up all over the place. It's like one of those things where you didn't even know to look, but like as soon as you buy a car, you see that car everywhere on the road. I know there's a name for that, but that's been TSIA for me. And so
there's probably some German term that means exactly that, but we don't know it,
Yes. Yeah. So that's why I've been really excited to have you on. And, so Steve, we do these revenue rules. You started to kind of just go down the first one there, but go ahead, just rattle off. What's your first revenue rule?
Well, the mantra that we start with at TSIA is one that was coined by our CEO, JB Wood, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And the mantra is this: helping will sell, selling won't help. And the genesis of that really came with this idea around services. And so when you look at any tech company, especially one that's been around for a while, if you look at all the touches that occur between a vendor and their customer, sales is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Just the tip. If you add up the touches that are happening with support, if you're a company that sells hardware, your field services techs, they're actually, the guys and gals that go out in vans inside, the company's environment and fix it. Professional services folks who go out and actually install it and make it run. Now customer success, which is really a huge and growing part of most as a service companies, rightfully so, by the way. And if you want to talk about why we think that, I'm happy to go into it. But somehow, some way, services and sales grew apart during the course of, somewhere between the 80s and the dawn of the as a service world. And there became this kind of Chinese wall, or false barrier between them. Maybe a better analogy is separation of church and state. That, hey, we're in services, we're the
We don't sell.
trusted advisor.
Right.
We can't play a role in revenue generation because that will compromise our status as trusted advisor. Sales is off doing their sleazy sales thing. No, we're here to help. And that's fine to a point. But when you are trying to help a customer solve a problem, or if you're trying to help one of your customers actually, follow through on the promise of what you sold them, right, and actually get the value out of their technology investment, or you're helping them figure out what, get to their desired business outcome, selling is not evil. Selling is one of the most helpful things you can do. And that it may involve them spending a little more money with you. But if you were a doctor and there was a cure for what ailed you,
Right.
but it was an extra, $400 or $500 to go buy the medicine, the doctor wouldn't tell you, well, hey, don't go buy the medicine because I don't want to take any more money from you. Yeah, it'll make you better, but I don't want to sell it to you. Come on, I'm not a salesman.
Right.
But that's what we do, and it's this mindset. So as we've really studied this idea of moving from a sales mindset to a revenue mindset, which when you start to think about how the world works in a non-transactional as a service cloud-based world, the deal is just the beginning of a 2-year relationship. Tom, most as a service deals don't even get profitable until about somewhere between 18 and 24 months down the road. And if you look at it, if you're lucky, you're going to get a year's, most as a service deals of 3 years. That's both in our studies, that's both the mean and the median. So it's 3 years is the standard. But you're going to be lucky, darn lucky, if you get a year of that 3 years up front. Probably won't. You'll be lucky if you get 1 month up front and maybe some setup fees. And so the vast majority of the money that's going to be changing hands between a vendor and their customer happens long time after sales has moved on. And that relationship is now under the purveyance of customer success and services. And by the way, we haven't talked about the virtual touch points yet, which are many, many multiples the times of sales. And so it's in the hands of your digital customer experience as well.
Right.
So if those folks just have an orientation to do nothing but solve a problem and move on, you're doing your company and your customer a tremendous disservice. Because if you can use those interactions, digital, human, however they may occur, to advance the customer, to have a plan, to move them down, farther in, towards their goals and leverage the investment they've already made, that's a win for everybody.
Right.
So when we say helping will sell, selling won't help, you don't have to come at it with I guess the biggest analogy I can think of is a lot of times, for those of us who still have cable TV and haven't cut the cord yet. I'm trying to, by the way, my wife will not let me do it. She likes having a remote control and punching in, channel 163 to watch Law and Order or whatever.
I have it hardwired into my house. It's part of my HOA, so I literally can't get rid of it.
I hear you. And those of us Gen X and above may be living with cable forever. I don't know. But it isn't necessarily when you say helping will sell, selling will help. Like you call the cable and it's like, oh yeah, okay, we've restored your service after the storm. Would you like HBO Max? And that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
What we're talking about is you see a problem that is in the context of an opportunity rather within the context of the problem the customer's having. And when you can solve that problem, you're really doing everybody the right way. And so it helps. There's a lot of things you can do to make this happen. We spend a lot of time helping our member companies figure out what offers they should put, because if you're expecting that customer success manager to sell some complex enterprise deal, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But if it's getting them another feature or two, or a little more capacity or a little more bandwidth to be able to do this, yeah, that's within bounds and that's helpful. If you've got a field tech who's out there and servicing, say, like an MRI machine in a hospital, and you notice the bed is worn, yes, sell them the extra mattress. You should do that. You shouldn't leave that off to a salesperson. Like, you're there, you're part of the company, you're helping. Nobody wants that.
Right.
So preventative maintenance contracts. I work, MRI machines were on my mind because I work with a medical device company. As one of our members, I talked to him yesterday, and we were trying to focus on, like, what's the problem that their field techs can solve. And one of the folks said, well, we have these ultrasound machines and the batteries go out, but we can monitor it so that we can proactively replace the batteries when they're getting low. The customer just has to buy the monitoring. Well, I mean, nobody wants dead batteries in an ultrasound, Tom. Like, you're going in, it's not hard to figure out the problem here. It's like, you're going in, you're going to find out if you're going to have a boy or a girl, and you're doing the ultrasound, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, battery's dead. That's not a problem. You have to convince people, but and if you don't think that's helpful in letting that hospital system know that the battery is not going to be out when, or is not going to be operable, then I can't. Maybe too far gone, but helping will sell. And if you really take that mindset, not only is selling not evil or sleazy or anything like that, it's a profoundly helpful act.
Yeah. And do you think that, I mean, I see this a lot, and again, some people are, more wired for hunting and where you have to, the job's different, right? And so when you think about the people on the service side, right, kind of the post-sale, a lot of people don't think that's their job, right? They just don't, like, I'm the fixer, like, or I'm the trusted advisor in today's nomenclature, or the field tech. They're just out there to fix the problem, and they should close up shop, and I did my job and I'm off. Like, so when you talk to these clients, and how are you helping, how are they helping these people kind of expand their mind to say, what, sales isn't sleazy, you are helping, right? And they're just going to pay you for that service. Like, how do you push that mindset down within the organization when people are sometimes very averse to dealing with money or asking for a sale?
There's a couple, 2 or 3 different things that I'd say that you can do. So if this is something you sound interested in, TSIA, first of all, you can go to TSIA.com, and we have all sorts of, even some free outside of the paywall info on how to do this, and webinars we've done, et cetera. So it's actually there. But I'll give you 2 or 3 things that really make a difference. And then I'll tell you a couple that won't, which kind of leads into my revenue rule number 2. Number 1 is what they sell is super important. So again, one of the things that really moves the needle on this is, do you have offers that are optimized or created for this situation? Because again, somebody who is not a sales expert cannot come in and do a highly customized, highly bespoke deal with multiple layers of approval, right? Do you have offers that solve a specific problem that someone in their situation will run into on a regular basis? And we use the acronym STAR. It needs to be simple, transactional, analytics driven, which I'll talk about in just one second, and repeatable. And if it's executable by the person that you're on the phone with, or your regular business contact, and they don't have to go get multiple levels of approval, and it's in the context of what you're dealing with, boy, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So what they sell is really, really important. The second thing that we see is using data to make this easier. If I'm selling you life insurance, and I come into you and talk to you in generalities, I'm not going to do very well. Hey, Tom, you're a man in your mid to late 40s. Men in their mid to late 40s sometimes start having heart issues when they get older. So you should really think about this insurance plan for people who get older. And it's generalities. That's a very sales pitch. On the flip side, if I'm holding a copy of your EKG and it's not ideal, like then it's like, hey, boy, you need to buy this, right? And I maybe life insurance is the wrong, maybe it should be whatever the offer that's in contract.
Right.
But the point is, like, when I know something about the customer, it's amazing. It's not selling anymore. It's literally helping. We work with one of our members who's in networking equipment, and they were having a hell of a hard time getting their field true account executives to sell some of their new add-on offerings around monitoring, around as a service, because it's a different sell than what they had before. So they had kind of these customer service type people. There were kind of a hybrid sales service thing. So we're like, hey, let's try these guys. And so what they did, now I'm not going to name what company it was, but they had some offerings around security and network security and monitoring. And so they're like, where can we go and how can we solve this? So what they did was they actually went to their support logs. Nobody in sales ever looks at a support log. Come on,
Right.
That's not what we do, right?
Sure.
But at a macro level, we went to the support logs and said, okay, let's look for companies who have, spend less than $500,000 a year with us, so not the really big ones, but have had more than 10 security escalations and support in the last year. And again, we found the problem that nobody really argues is a problem. Like second level security escalations are, I don't really need to explain to somebody why they don't want that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they had tremendous success at that, because when they called the customer, instead of saying, hey, have you heard about our new security monitoring program? And here's the benefits, and here's the features, and here's all the reasons you should buy it. It's like, no, you had 10 security breaches last year. Would you like us to monitor this so we'll tell you proactively when you're having one? Yes. So again,
Yeah,
helping,
that's a great example.
Yeah, data and analytics. We're not talking, Amazon level AI here.
Right.
Support logs. It's a spreadsheet. And you have more data than you think. You just got to know where to look. And if you think about this question, and getting back to the helping will sell, selling will help. If the customer is having a problem that you can solve, how would they solve it? What would they do? Who would they call? Would they go to your online help? Would they call your support line? Would they call their TAM if they have one? So if you start with that, like, what are the problems that we can solve with our offers, and how would we know if the customer is having this problem? Then you're looking at the data with a purpose, instead of just trying to find, someone wandering in the woods trying to find, golden needle. It's not. It gives you purpose and reasons. So yeah.
Right. Well, I just was having this conversation with Nine Lenses, my day job. We work a lot with consulting and advisory companies, and there's a big challenge within consulting firms, because there's usually some person who owns the entire account, right? So if it's an Accenture type or an accounting firm like EY, somebody owns the entire account.
Right.
Now they're an expert usually in one thing, whether it be tax, could be, audit, it could be IT, it doesn't matter, but somebody owns that account, but they have one area of domain expertise. But one of the biggest challenges that they have there is, how do they get comfortable talking about or introducing to their customer other things the firm can sell? Right. So you may be an IT person or an audit or tax or, whatever it is, but then you hear your customer talking about a cyber issue, and you have a cyber practice, but you're like, I don't know anything about cyber. I don't want to bring somebody in and pitch my customer. This is kind of exactly what I hear from you, maybe it's in a different sort of industry, like in healthcare, but it's that same idea, the person on the
It's the
ground.
exact same idea.
Yeah.
You just don't want to waste those. And by the way, there's other things you can do. We found that, how easy you make that entry. So when somebody is in an entirely different line of business, if you've got a really easy to use form that they can put in, where they can capture that information, pass it on. It has to be a process. And by the way, as we always say, email is not a process. So shooting you a note doesn't do it, but documenting it and actually putting something in place to handle it can. But I'll tell you what, here's the interesting part, and this kind of goes to my second rule, and we'll talk a little more about hardcore, sales here in a second too. What didn't move the needle in incentivizing all these different, service focused teams to start taking some basic sales motions, even around like lead capture and things like that. What didn't really matter was compensation. So I've had companies that I work with on this that will pay their people like up to, 2% of the deal that they find, up to $5,000. And and if they find a lead, or they, discover something that turns into a sale, or that they actually sell themselves, or even that, but I've also had member companies that I work with who literally pay nothing, but do some gamification and non-monetary recognition, and they do pretty well too. And so the amount of money you pay doesn't necessarily move the needle. And this is a shocker to a lot of sales leaders, because we are under this impression that if we just change the comp plan, behaviors will change. Like we've all said it and we've all heard it, like comp drives behavior. Salespeople are coin operated, which is, I guess so, but I can put a coin in the claw machine and it doesn't give me a game of Pac-Man. So it doesn't matter if you're not doing the right things. It doesn't matter what coin you put in. So the second rule that I have across the board is the comp plan is not transformational. You cannot solve your big problems with the comp plan. If you're trying to tweak little behaviors between what salespeople already know how to do and what they're competent and confident doing, then yeah, you can move the needle a little bit. But we work, the two kind of big constituencies we work with at TSIA, Tom, are services-based organizations, customer service organizations, but then when we work with sales and the broader executive team, a lot of times it's around the transformation from being a deal-driven, transactional product and license company to trying to be one that's driven by subscription and cloud. And I can't tell you how many VPs of sales or even COOs have called me personally and said, "Hey, Steve, we're trying to get our salespeople to sell the new cloud offer. Do you have an example of a good comp plan?" And my answer is, well, yes, I do, but you need to stop for a second. Because if you just try to, incentivize them to sell this new offer with nothing but the comp plan, you will fail, most likely. B, you're just going to pay a lot of money for deals that are going to happen anyway.
Right.
But you're not going to get them to sell something they don't feel comfortable with.
Wow, that's a big word. Yeah, comfort. Go ahead, keep going.
Well, and when I say comfortable with, it's not just that they feel comfortable with their own ability to pitch it. They also have to feel confident that you're going to be able to deliver it. And that it's going to work, and it's not going to take an extra, 3x the deal cycle to get it done. And so, if you ask me to sell something I didn't believe in, or I didn't really trust it was going to work, or I didn't think I had the support on it from the organization, you could pay me 3x, but I'm not going to ruin my relationship with the customer, even if I know how to do it. So what we tell people Tom, I don't know if you have any questions on, just stop me here.
No, I think this is really, I mean, I completely agree with everything that you're saying. I mean, we hear this all the time. So I'm just an active listener here. So, no, you're answering all my questions as you're just going from one to the next.
Well, I'll tell you this. Here's what does matter. And I've said this, and I will shout this off the rooftops like a crazy man. And maybe I am. My kids probably think I am already. But when we work with our member companies on making this transformation, we say, okay, and by the way, the flip side to compensation is training. That's the other place that sales leaders turn when they think, oh, yeah, hey, we're going to sell this new offer. Let's just put some training on it. Training and comp, right? That's the solution. No, that's important, but it comes last, not first. And so what we tell our member companies is start by getting into genuine alignment. Make a plan. Agree on the plan. You want to sell a new as a service offer? Great. A plan is not go sell as much of it as you can to whoever you want. And the plan is not, sell to the new customers, but not to the existing ones, right? That's not a plan. Like, what's your goal? What percentage of your revenue do you want to come from this new cloud offer this year, next year? Because figure that out. What's your risk tolerance? Because if you're going to go sell the new thing, it means you're jeopardizing your revenue streams from the old thing. So,
right.
What are you doing? And you got to have a plan.
And do you find, because I do see a lot of times where companies introduce a new product and then it falls flat, right?
Yeah.
And it happens, and I completely agree. People aren't comfortable or confident in their ability to sell it. I didn't even think about, you were talking about just, am I confident my company can deliver it, right? Usually I kind of just say, like, if they're not comfortable talking about it, they're just never going to sell it anyway, right? But you're right. Where do you see kind of in a bell curve, like where companies struggle the most with introducing these sort of capabilities? And, is it the comp? Well, we know the comp's not going to work, but like, where do you see most companies struggle?
Well, I'd say that it depends, right? A lot of it depends on just how different is the sale that you're talking about having them do from the sale that they were doing. And is the buyer different? Is the budget different? I don't want to go too deep into it, but one of the places we see members struggle really badly is in managed services. So, managed service is a whole different sell. If you're selling somebody, say, networking equipment, that is a whole different sale entirely than coming in and say, hey, we're going to manage your network for you.
Right.
And in fact, if you're having the same people do that sale, if you try to take that operational sales pitch to an executive, it isn't going to work. And by the way, if you try to take that, we'll manage your network for you, to the person who's running the network, you're liable to get thrown out of the building because
that's their job.
That's their job. Yeah, exactly. Like, no, please let me lay myself off. That would be great. So that's where I see them struggle is like, if it's just, if you're somebody selling software anyway, and now you got a cloud module on top of the software, that's usually something that people can get on board with because it's not that different. The purchasing is different, but the modality is a little bit different, but people can usually get there. Different buyer, different budget, different use case. Then that's a whole different story.
Yeah, and I see a lot of times people struggling going from they're selling something transactional and now they want to sell something more complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a more consultative sales process, and they have no idea how to bridge that gap from transactional, pushing product, number of units, volume, whatever it is, to now a complex service or software.
Well, for anybody who's stuck around for the last 30 minutes or so, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to give you like the I Ching. I'm going to give you the meaning of life here, okay? Or that nugget. The DNA of transformation are KPIs. What you measure, the key performance indicators. And so, and I've said that, and people look at me like but we've seen it over and over again. And I'll give you an example from a sales perspective. So, we talk about, can we deliver? All right. A a lot of times, well, let's talk from the sales side first. I can change the comp plan and say, sell the new thing. Okay. But selling the new thing, like our sales organization will not be optimized for it. If you just change the comp plan and I can hit my number without selling the new thing, it's again, not transformational.
Right.
But if you give my sales leader a KPI that 20% of my revenue has to be from the new thing in 2 years, it changes everything, not just the comp, right? It changes who I hire. It changes the competencies I'm looking for skills wise. It changes my accounting. It changes the systems I build on the back end. Yeah, if you change the goals, then you change how you get there. If you just say on the end, we're going to pay you differently, there's not that true DNA.
There's no true forcing function.
No,
right?
No, and I'll tell you this too, where it's worse. Since we come from a little bit of a service background, and for any salespeople out here, you force the issue on this one seriously. Most service orgs, especially professional services, the people are going to come in and do the implementations. The project-based work they do is way more lucrative than any sort of lift and shift over to the cloud. I mean, it's more fun, it's more lucrative. Now, so you talk about KPIs, right? If that service organization is running on its own P&L and they have to make their profit number, do you think they're going to hire people or invest in the capabilities needed to support the new offer? No. Not unless you change their KPIs,
right,
and not unless you change what success looks like for them.
Right.
So bottom line is, if you want to make real transformation, so I said the comp plan is not transformational is rule number 2. If you want real change, comp plan ain't going to do it. If you have to transform your go-to-market, comp plan is the last thing, not first. I spend so much time helping our member companies figure out what's your risk tolerance. Where do you want to be? What's your position? How fast do you want to get through this? Okay, because that determines the speed, it determines the aggressiveness, it determines a lot of the KPIs, it determines what we measure, it determines what goes on the dashboard, it determines what we talk about, it determines who we hire. And so there's so much that goes into that. But if you just try to solve it through the comp plan, you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years and not get there.
They wonder why no one's selling it. Yeah,
exactly. And then you can say hi to the PE firm that buys you. So
no, that's great. No, I wasn't, I wasn't sure where you were going to take that. When I saw you write me that the comp plan is not transformational, but now I clearly understand. Having been in sales where people think you're right, people follow, their behavior follows the comp plan, and I think we've seen there's just that's not true, right? And you did a fantastic job of bringing that out and talking about what does, like the KPIs, and really forcing people's change. Now this has been great, Steve. This is I think we could talk for another hour on a lot of these topics. We're just scratching the surface really on some of these challenges that you are helping executives think about, right? And a lot of this is it's not rocket science ideas, but it's really hard to get right. Like just like some of these, a lot of this is learned behavior, but like when you say it, you're like, well, of course, it sounds completely natural, Steve. I mean, that makes sense to me when you talk about it, but it goes against a lot of norms that we've learned along the way. And sometimes it's like, I think you're forcing people to stop and think that, they may not have done, they're just rushing to get a new product out or something like that.
Yeah, all of that is important. And that isn't to say that the comp plan isn't important. It is. That isn't to say that training isn't important. It's really important. But if you just try to solve that problem, like you said, and it's a new thing, if it's a little new and a little different, you can probably get there. But if you're really looking to do hardcore transformation from one business model to another,
Good
you
luck.
nailed
Yeah,
it.
you need. Yeah, your business
It
needs to
has to be
transform
deeper.
equally.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, where can we follow you online?
Well, I do a few things. First of all, TSIA.com. I'm one of many of researchers and leaders at TSIA who are thinking about this stuff all day long. Blogs, webinars, all of us. We're at TSIA.com. I'm on LinkedIn at Steve Frost. I'm on Twitter at Steve Frosty. Although during football season, I kind of have to purge myself from Twitter a little bit. I can get lost real fast reading about conference realignment and fantasy football. So I divorced myself a little bit. I'm not the most active person on social media, but most of what we do is through TSIA.com, through the TSIA blog, through the TSIA social media. Like I said, I've got an entire team of people that is thinking about nothing but, not just that as a service transformation, but the as a service transformation as it pertains to your channel go-to-market strategy. Because if you think the as a service movement messes with your direct motion, wait till you see what it does to the channel. Because the channel, you've built it all up for one way, and that's been going that way for 30 years. And now all of a sudden, going to a subscription model breaks everything. And so this is huge. I've got a dedicated, really, really smart researcher who does nothing but research on growth and renewal. So we've got an existing customer. We want to treat them differently than just the way, you're kind of one throat to choke model. That doesn't really work in this world. So best practices for growing a customer into renewal, both from a small segment all the way up to the enterprise. So, and then we're talking about best practices in customer success, best practices in just overall data and analytics. So a lot of stuff there. It's not just me. We've like you said, TSIA is one of those companies that you just don't really notice until all of a sudden you find out what's there. It's like, oh my God, there's all sorts of good stuff there.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
come check it out. It's if you're in tech, it's worth the time.
I can concur, and I've was turned on to TSIA last year, and now I'm reading a bunch of your stuff. So that's why I've been so excited to have you on, Steve. Thanks for coming on, sharing just a nugget or two about things in the tech world and selling and the transformation that comes with it. This has been really helpful. So thank you again, and let's do it again soon.
Hey, look forward to it, Tom. We'll see you hopefully around. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to The Revenue Hustle. This episode has been brought to you by 9 Lenses. Close more deals with interactive assessments. Check them out at 9lenses.com. See you next time.